Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome to Israel Unplugged. This is where you get the unadulterated facts of where we're holding in the redemptive process, focusing primarily on the ingathering of the exiles. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim, Yira Kodesh. Unfortunately, my co-host, Rabbi Moshe Lichtman, cannot make it today because he is ill. And for that, and for the many other people that are ill out there, I'm going to start this segment a little bit different than normally. I'm going to start it with a prayer for the sick people. He who blessed our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses and Aaron, David and Solomon, may he bless and heal the sick people, including Moshe David Halevi ben Elisha Michla and Harav Kenyevsky, Rav Shmaryahu Yosef Chaim ben Pesha Miriam, and of course the President of the United States and his First Lady. May he bless and heal the sick people, and may he, in the reward of praying for him, blessed be he, be filled with compassion for them and restore their health to heal them, to strengthen them, and to revive them. And may he send them speedily a complete recovery from heaven and among the other sick people that are around the world they're going through these terrible, terrible times. A recovery of the spirit and a recovery of the body. Swiftly and soon, now we respond, amen. I say this because my co-host, unfortunately, has come down with the coronavirus, something which I had, Baruch Hashem. Thank God I did not have. I was asymptomatic. He has some symptoms. And there are many other people out there today, maybe some that are even listening today, that have recently gone through or are going through this terrible virus. And we wish them all well, from the president and the chief rabbis all the way down the line. Today we have a lineup different than what we usually have. Like I said, we usually go back and forth between myself and the co-host. Today we have something completely different lined up for you. We have a lineup, a roller coaster lineup of VIPs from all our segments. So you want to stay tuned because we have very, very interesting show coming up in a few minutes. We're going to have first Yossi Baumol speak about the redemptive process, and then we're going to have the media Blitz with Avi Abelow. And finally, we're going to have Dr. Sharni Brodesky, who is a clinical psychiatrist, speak about Aliyah, about coming back with children to Israel and the effects that one has when you are coming back to Israel with children. That's one of the biggest concerns, of course.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Israel Unplugged. This is Josh Wander, and we have our first segment of our roller coaster Sukkot show, and we're going to bring on a guest, Yossi Baumol. Yossi Baumol is somewhat of an expert in an interesting topic, and that is of the redemptive process, especially according to the teachings of the Vilna Gaon of the Gra, and we'd love to hear more from Yossi about that topic. Yossi, are you there?
Yes, I am. Moadim L'Simcha, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Well, if we're talking about the Vilna Gaon and Sukkot, so he points out a very interesting thing. It says, there's a passage that says, Vayhi b'shalem Sukkot u'monatot Zion, God's residence is in Yerushalayim, and his home is in Zion, and his Sukkah is in Zion, and the Vilna Gaon says that this is comparing Eretz Yisrael to a Sukkah, because there are only two mitzvot, two commandments that you could keep by just physically being there. One is by being inside the Sukkah, and we know even the story from the Gemara about Rabbi Akiva, who broke open a hole in the roof of when a baby was born so that the baby could be in the sukkah. Just by being there without knowing what was going on, he was doing the mitzvah of being in the sukkah. And so too, by being just physically in Eretz Yisrael, we're doing a mitzvah without even doing anything. So that's one interesting parallel between the two. But there's an even more interesting one that he pointed out. He pointed out that there's a special condition for building a sukkah, and that is that it's oseh velo min ha'asui. You can't have it sort of like just appear. You have to build it from the ground up. First the walls and then the schach. And so too, he says, just like the sukkah must be built up from the ground up, also we have to build it up from the ground up and then the schach. And I guess it's a metaphor for the idea that the physical building comes before the spiritual building.
Incredible. This is an incredible holiday, and it has we read on the holiday about the nevuah, the prophecy of Zechariah, and he speaks about very redemptive concepts. He speaks about Tchiat HaMeitim. We also read about Ezekiel's bones. We're speaking about Har Zeitim, about the Mount of Olives splitting in a giant earthquake. All these redemptive things that are, tell us something about what do you think about Sukkot and the redemptive process, especially when it comes to these nevuot?
Well, it's interesting that at the end of Zechariah, it's in chapter 14. I forgot exactly which passage. It talks about how that all the nations of the world will come to celebrate Sukkot in Jerusalem. And what's interesting is that right before that we see there's a plague is described that strikes the entire world. The plague, honestly, does not sound exactly like what we're going through right now. The symptoms are a bit different, but nevertheless,
sounds more like a nuclear blasphemy.
And it says, in those nations that will survive after the plague, they will come to celebrate the holiday of Sukkot in Jerusalem. So that's an interesting point. What else can we talk about? There's interesting things going on. Which we didn't read this year because Shabbat didn't fall out during the Chol HaMoed. The Haftorah there talks about the war of Gog and Magog. It's very interesting that if we try to trace geographically where is the land of Magog, according to the Gaonim and other places, it's basically on the Turkish-Iranian border. And I don't know if you're following the news, but right now there seems to be developing some kind of a little war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And apparently Turkey and Iran are both getting involved in that war. I don't know. I don't know if this is what's going to happen, but this is not the first time a war broke out in the Middle East during the week of Sukkot. The attack, when America attacked Afghanistan, it was on Hoshana Rabbah. How many years ago? It was a long time ago.
Long time ago.
12 years ago, I think it was, something like that. I remember distinctly that the planes took off on Hoshana Rabbah when they started the attack in response to the Twin Towers coming down. So this is certainly the holiday of Eretz Yisrael, and we celebrate the fruitfulness. And one of the signs of the redemption is the hills of Israel will become green again when my nation comes back to you. And this, we all know, is something that we see with our own eyes. The area that demarcates the previous border between the West Bank and Israel proper, so to speak, is called the Green Line, because in 1967, when you would fly over the area where the Jews lived was green, and the areas where the Jews didn't live wasn't green. And this is brought in Masechet Sanhedrin as one of the proofs the most clear proof that the redemption is on the way is when we see the hills of Israel turn green again, as is mentioned in Yeshayahu.
Incredible. Tell us about Aliyah. Tell us about what does it mean to have the Jews come back home to their land, and that as part of the redemptive process.
What does it mean? It means that people who are lost and the people who are not in their home, they don't have their family, they don't have their support systems. They're all lost and they're all disconnected. And by coming home, you're back in your house again, and hopefully God will come back to His house again. We know that it says that God will not return to Jerusalem until it's all built up. which also was brought by the Vilna Gaon. If you want, I can actually pull out the book here where it says that. But this is, God is waiting for us to do our share so that we too should come back. And I think people have to understand that it's not only they'll be saving themselves, but they're also taking part in and having the benefit of taking part in the actual redemption.
You were actually in touch with a group of...
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
It says in the Midrash, on the Pasuk, Uvalatzi and go, I'm reading from the Kol HaTorah by the students of the Vilna Gaon. As long as Zion is not rebuilt, the Redeemer will not come. And as our rabbis tell us in Masechet Megillah Daf Yud Zayin, since Yerushalayim, as soon as Yerushalayim is built, Ben David ba, Mikevan Yerushalayim nivnet, Ben David ba, the son of David comes. And as the Medrash says over there, Ein Ben David ba ad shetei Yerushalayim nivnet. So in other words, by coming back here, by making your home in Israel, you're doing your part in actually bringing the redemption.
And you were in touch with a group of Hasidim, Satmar Hasidim, that are traditionally anti-Zionist. They don't believe in coming back to the land until the Messiah has come. But they are now very interested in what's going on and thinking perhaps for the first time about the concept of returning home, even against the teachings that they have been taught all their lives.
Yes, there's a shul in Williamsburg called the Shtibel, where we have people who are mainly Satmar Hasidim, but other Hasidim as well, who live a totally Hasidic life. They go to the Rebbe, they do everything that everybody else does. However, they also study Rav Kook, they also study all these things. A lot of them, when I gave a class to them a year and a half ago on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, they actually knew some of the sources better than I did, some of them. They were really learned, and this is something that is happening, that people are understanding that if you really want to be a Torah Jew, it's got to be back here in the land of the Torah.
How do you think that the upcoming U.S. elections are going to affect Aliyah? What are your predictions?
Well, I don't know. I'm not our rabbis tell us that the prophecy was given over in odd times to fools, and I don't think I'm a fool, so I don't want to make any predictions. But what scares me is that you have a very unique situation where America is really torn apart by two opposing sides. And the only thing they have in common is there are those among them who in both camps who hate Jews. And I'm very much afraid that no matter what happens, in view of all the unrest that we've seen in the United States over the last year or so, that no matter what happens, whether Trump wins or Biden wins, the losing side is not going to take it so easily, and it will cause even more strife, and I don't wish it to the United States. The United States is a wonderful country. They've done so many wonderful things for the world, and they really need to try and find a way to get their act together. But I'm very much afraid that after the elections that this situation will continue, and it's something that people should be aware about. When one has to see the signs of what's going on and try to make plans for the future. I mean, imagine if a believing Jew believes that someday the Mashiach will come and that we'll have to move to Israel. Imagine when all of Lakewood sells their house at the same time. What's going to happen to the prices of real estate in Lakewood when that happens? Or in Flatbush, right? But if you sell your house now and move now, while the suburbs are still going up in price. I have cousins of mine who came in Aliyah just a few weeks ago, and they told me they sold their house in Teaneck for more than they expected to because people are running away from the cities and going to the suburbs. Now is a great time to cash in on your real estate overseas and come here and buy in Israel. Prices are not up here at the moment because of the situation. On the other hand, people who are living in outlying communities at least can certainly sell their houses for a good price, and now is really a good time to take advantage and come in Aliyah.
So regardless of who wins the election, you see perhaps problems for the U.S. Jewry, and I see it the same way. I mean, if Trump gets in, I think that there's going to be, I don't know about a civil war, but there's going to be massive unrest. If Biden gets in, we know what we're going to go back to Obama days, or even worse, maybe Carter days, where they're going to be bending over backwards to make deals with Iran and to destroy everything that Trump has done for Israel, including moving the U.S. embassy here and recognizing the Golan Heights. And any way you look at it, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, look, I have to clarify. I'm not worried about Israel. No matter who wins in the United States, we have somebody watching over us. That's not the issue. If you think for a moment that God works in mysterious ways, and the fact is that if we have a peace treaty right now with a few Arab countries, we just signed just a few weeks ago, it's because of the fact that we had the President Obama in the United States and the Sunni governments here in the area were fearful of his weakness, and therefore they became our friends. So God did good things
we have
for
to
the
end. I'm
Jews,
sorry, we have a hard break coming up, but thank you so much for joining us. And stay tuned for our next segment. Thank you so much.
Show.
Tamar, she's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things, but at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Okay, welcome back. We are back now with our roller coaster Sukkot edition, where we have a lineup of VIPs. We just heard from Rabbi Yossi Baumol about the redemptive process, about the Vilna Gaon, about the prophecies, and now we have the media expert, Avi Abelow, to discuss current events. There's so much happening, and this all affects Aliyah. This all affects the Jewish people's return to Israel, and there is so much happening. I can't keep up with it. I mean, I don't know if you can keep up with it, Avi. I think it's nonstop what's going on.
Yeah, it's a dizzying. It's a dizzying reality we're living in. Shalom aleichem, Adim Simcha. Josh, thanks for having me on your show.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. I was this morning at the Kotel. The Kotel, for those that don't know, the Western Wall usually has thousands, tens of thousands of people that come for the holiday of Sukkot, and they come for the priestly blessings, for the Birkat Kohanim. I was there today, and there were a couple dozen people at the Kotel because of Corona, because of the closure. It was just an unbelievable flight. They said it was the first time in 50 years that they've had such a thing, and we hope never to see it again. But what's going on today is completely unprecedented. I just want to get your take, Avi, on what's happening. The election, what's happening here with the craziness. It's just, like I said, it's just unprecedented, and it doesn't stop.
Yeah, listen, you and I and obviously our emunah, our faith, we're able to see through all this craziness that's going around us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't be sending more signs, more signals for all of us to wake up, like the simple Dvar Torah that I gave with my kids in the Sukkah, as we're sitting in the Sukkah, saying, listen, what's going on here? Why aren't we in the house? Why aren't we in the Sukkah? It's specifically because we're supposed to be in a hut without protection, without the security that we're in charge, that we can protect ourselves. God is running the world, and he wants all of mankind to wake up and say, all right, get out of your security zones, guys. Yeah. You have to trust the one above. You have to start believing the one above and following his ways. The craziness with the protests in Israel, the protests in America. Yeah, I don't necessarily want to get political, but you definitely see there are powers out there, and they're trying to destroy society, and it's the same struggle that we're experiencing in Israel. It's not necessarily an anti-religious struggle, but it is. It's a struggle against the values that Judaism brings to this world, the values of religion, the values of family, etc., etc. It's the same struggle taking place in America, in Europe, in Israel. And for Jews all around the world, they should be waking up, saying, okay, yeah, we have our struggles here in Israel, but here it's home. Come home. This is the only place where we can protect ourselves, the only place where we're supposed to be, the place where we're supposed to be making the world a better place. And God is sending the signals. The question is, how many of our brethren are waking up? Do you really want to wake up in America as it continues to get worse? I mean, listen, I have political arguments with friends and family all the time. Anyone who's not familiar with me, I'm a big believer that, yes, President Donald Trump is one of the best presidents ever for the United States of America, making America the strong and secure country it's supposed to be, built on the values that it's supposed to be. He's not necessarily the best messenger. I mean, God definitely has a sense of humor, sending him to try to rebuild America as a more value-oriented society. I will give you that, but he's standing up and making that happen. And people are attacking me. He's horrible. He's a monster. He's Hitler. I mean, the comments I get, even people who know me, are like crazy comments. And I tell them, listen, let me tell you the following. Elections are coming in America, and I'm going to tell you this. Even though I'm a big Donald Trump, I believe Donald Trump should win in order for the benefit of America, for the benefit of the freedom-loving world, and for Israel. If he wins, things are not going to be so good in America, because the left is going to go crazy. I mean, even before he did anything in 2016, on Inauguration Day, he didn't do anything and they were rioting in the streets. Do you really think if he gets elected again, they're not going to be rioting even worse than they did in 2016? Now they know they're going to have another 4 years of the guy in the White House. I don't think it's going to be so peaceful on the streets of America. We're already seeing today how scary it is. And this is before the election, if he is reelected. And if that does happen, if that is the reality, not only is it not going to be safe for regular Americans, it's going to be even less safe for the Jews, because we're going to be targeted by the extremists on all sides. So that's if President Trump wins, and I want him to win. If Biden wins, and this is the major difference I explain to people, they say, oh, no, you got to have Biden win because he's going to calm things down. The left's going to calm down. I'm like, what are you, crazy? If Biden wins, then all of a sudden the left's in power. and they're going to be in the positions of power in Washington. All the extremists, all the Islamists, all the Marxists, all the anti-Semites, all of a sudden in Congress, they're going to grow, and they're going to have more power to use federal funding and federal decisions and laws to make the situation even worse for American people and the Jews. And they're not going to stop the extreme left Antifa, Black Lives Matter stuff either. So it's going to be even worse if Biden wins. So I said there's one thing I hope you can agree with. Regardless if Trump wins, regardless if Biden wins, come home to Israel. I mean, I want you to come home because I want you to come home. That should be the only reason. But if that's not enough, please come home
first
because
lesson
after these elections.
The first lesson that all our listeners can learn is that when an Israeli starts off saying that I don't want to get political, that's exactly when you're going to hear a whole diatribe of politics coming up. So, yes, I agree with everything.
You about what's going on today. It's hard not to get political, but I'm trying to focus on the positive, but yeah, you got to throw in a little politics. What can you do?
Absolutely, and I think that's it's interesting because there are a lot of American Jews, Orthodox American Jews. So I'm speaking about people that are believers, not people that are somehow jaded by other things, and they say, you know what, we have the same problems you have, or you have the same problems we have. You have riots, we have riots. We have corona, you have corona. you have terrorism, we have anti-Semitism, there's problems everywhere. So what's the difference? Your response?
It's a very basic response. Here we are home. Here, even though some of the problems are similar, our strength as a people, our Jewish identity is much stronger here, and we're able to stand up for ourselves. I mean, even though I do believe President Trump has been the best president for the Jewish people and the state of Israel, but when the proverbial bad stuff hits the fan in America, in whatever communities, and like we're seeing today, the president only has so much power. And each state has its own governor, and each city has its own mayor, and the Jews won't necessarily have the protection. I mean, regular Americans, not even Jews, are not even getting the protection. You had a couple, the couple, I forgot which city, outside what city, I think it was St. Louis, and because when the Black Lives Matter protesters are storming by their house, and they're fearful for their lives because they see what's going on in the streets, and they go out with guns to warn them. They're being prosecuted by the state prosecutor, I guess Missouri, I think, because it's outside St. Louis. Like all of a sudden you have government taking away people's rights even for self-defense. There's only so much a President Trump, even if he is reelected, can do to protect regular Americans, and especially the Jews, who are going to get it even worse. Here in Israel, even though we have similar issues, again, most of the country, we stand up for everybody, and we definitely stand up to protect the Jews, and we're much safer here because of that. Is there terror? Of course, there's terror. Do we take care of the terrorists like we're supposed to? No, we don't. And that's true. But with it all, we stand up protecting the Jewish people much better than any other place in the world is able to. So again, I want people to come here because this is home. But when it comes down to it, yeah, for safety reasons, if the same thing's happening in London or Pittsburgh or Tel Aviv, you want to be here in Tel Aviv because you are going to have a government and a populace that's going to be standing up shoulder to shoulder to protect you. I believe it's simple. I understand it's a complex situation and it's a great question, but again, having a Jewish state where we protect everyone, including all the non-Jews, with the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews, we protect them as well. We look after all Israeli citizens. We give much better protection than any Jew anywhere else in the world can get. So yeah, come home.
I just want to clarify that every president of the United States claims to be pro-Israel. Carter claimed to be pro-Israel. Clinton claimed to be pro-Israel. Obama claimed to be pro-Israel. Everyone's pro-Israel. But the question is how you define being pro-Israel. So when you hear that statement that someone is more or less pro-Israel, just understand that everyone claims to be pro-Israel. But sometimes some of the presidents, like the ones I just mentioned, when they say that they are pro-Israel, what they mean by that is they want to manipulate Israel into territorial concessions. They want to change it according to their agenda. And we're fortunate enough, like you said, to have a president now that's willing to let Israel be Israel, to let them do their own thing, to be proud Israelis. And that is something that's quite unique that we haven't seen definitely in many, many, many administrations.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, the major difference between President Trump and everyone else is it's interesting. Everyone else except Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan also, I would say, he's number 2 pro-Israel to President Trump.
Avi, we're coming up with a hard break.
Okay. So you told me when I have to stop?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but thank you so much for joining the show, and we want to have you on again. You are a light, a beacon of light in this very, very, very troubled time.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on The Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to the Israel Unplugged show. This is Josh Wander, and this is our last segment for our Sukkot edition. Our Sukkot edition is, like I said, is very different than our previous shows. When you listen to them, you'll see that usually we talk about different Torah concepts of Aliyah, but here we have this roundup, we have this lineup, I should say, of great speakers about the media, about the redemptive process, and now we have a great guest, Sharni Brodesky. She is a clinical psychologist. She's a clinician. She is a tell me what you are, Sharni.
Psychotherapist, psychologist.
Psychotherapist. There you go. So, and she specializes with children that are coming, families that are coming on Aliyah with children, and we'd love to hear about what is the main complaint, let's say, about children coming on Aliyah before they come. What are people complaining about? What are their concerns when they make Aliyah?
Okay, so I'm not sure I like the word complaint, but that's fine. Like, concern is a good word. Often people that are coming or thinking or considering Aliyah, they often want to really know that their kids are going to be well adjusted or at least be going to a good place. You know, the normal concerns that the school systems, the schools they choose will be right, and helping them with the language. And, you know, I guess a lot of the families, you know, after the career, after they figure out what they want to do for their parnasa and they're, you know, making a living, I guess the second main concern is how the kids adjust, really. So they want to know that.
How can we ease their minds?
Well, I normally take them through some of the main things that we see with Aliyah, with all them kids, that the process, you know, so preparing people to understand that this is a process. There are stages, you know, of the process, also for adults, also for kids, and that, you know, when people have a bit of a map and a bit of a map and understanding the process, they feel calmer. I usually point them in certain directions, like to, you know, contact people in the schools that they're thinking of sending to and have conversations so that they, you know, can ask the concerns to the specific places. We talk often about, like, keeping, you know, the structure in the family continuing, the routine as much as possible. Getting kids involved with the move so they feel they're part of it and they're not just totally out of the driver's seat. And help. Hold on 1 second, Josh. Sorry.
Sure. No, you're just showing that you have experience.
1 second. You're right. I do have experience. We had experiences with our own kids, Aliyah, and some adjustment difficulties that ended up being a very big growing point and really could help me identify and troubleshoot for parents, you know, in the future. That's really what inspired me to do this kind of work, so that other parents have kind of, you know, some good footing and grounding, and they feel more that they know, you know, where to put their focus and how to support their kids.
A big question that people ask, especially when they're making Aliyah, you know, one of the biggest concerns, especially if they're coming with children or with a big family, they want to know location, where they're going to move to, where the best schools are, where the best services are. So what do you recommend? There are two sides to this picture. There are some people that say you should move to a place that is a soft landing, like Beit Shemesh or Ra'anana, or places in Jerusalem where there's lots of Anglos and it's very easy just to speak English and to get along and have other people to speak to. And there are other people that take the other side and say just throw them in the pool. Go into a place that's completely Hebrew speaking, and they will learn to be Israeli. They'll integrate much, much quicker. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it's quite important to know the strengths in your own family and to know your own kind of level of support and your own level of language coming in, because let's say one spouse has Hebrew or has family here, you automatically have kind of help, I guess, in navigating the system. On the other hand, I think when two people are coming in without the language, with kids, no family, I think English-speaking communities can be extremely helpful, at least in the settling in part, because just remember, they're still coming to a totally new part of the world. Even though it's a Jewish part of the world, it can still be, it's got a very different culture in Israel, so there are going to be lifestyle adjustments. And I want to say that even if they're moving to Beit Shemesh or Anana or somewhere where there's a high density population of English-speaking families, you're still in Israel. I mean, you still need to figure out the language, speak to teachers. There's no English-speaking pocket where everything's done in English. Things are done in Hebrew. It's kind of more the level of support system that, you're looking for, and the kind of work you might want to do, and, your level of language and your level of support. So I think all of those things. And also, I'm going to add how resilient your kids are. I mean, if you're having children come with pre-existing issues and they have sensitivities, a move like this could be very overwhelming with new language, with new everything. So that kind of soft landing can be extremely helpful with the adjustment of children when the environment's already kind of used to it and knows kind of some of the issues to look out for. So I think it really depends on the family, the structure, and the support, and the language, and some of the issues I've mentioned. Does that help?
Talk to me a little bit about age, because some people have a concern about at what ages they should bring their family. Some people say we should wait until or better to bring them when they're young. Some people say we should wait until they're a little bit older, once they finished school, high school. What is there a best age to make Aliyah?
I mean, when we moved and we chose the time when our oldest was going into Kita Aleph, because I was figuring that the transition between Gun and elementary school is already, preschool and elementary is quite a big step, so already there's going to be an adjustment. I think that's a really good natural time to come, but if you've got older kids, I don't think it's a reason not to come. You might have further, issues like the language. As the kids get older, they become a little bit more self-conscious about not knowing the language. And even older than that, like teens and whatnot, you're leaving like a peer support, which they're at an age where peers are really important. So you're going to have to sort of work out, maybe make connections when you come, like that are more social for those older kids, and make them, join groups or interest groups and hobbies that's when an English-speaking community can really help, because then they can meet, other kids who've gone through what they've gone through earlier, and it really helps if they have someone they know in the school. I mean, and also their level of social skills. So I think there's a whole basket of, I think it's not an easy thing to move, but it's definitely worth it if you can support your children through that at whatever age. They just have different issues at different ages to be thought through. And here at the other end, there is a bunch of support services that you can find, because there's so many English speakers here in all sorts of professions, and education and mental health, and it's kind of not worth just prolonging it necessarily, because in the end we have to deal with whatever comes.
A lot of people that are coming from different parts of the world, and even in the United States, people coming from places like upstate New York, they get great social services when it comes to special needs kids. Do you have any experience with special needs? Coming on Aliyah with special needs kids is a whole package in itself. Do you have any experience with that? Can you give us any insight about that?
I think in Israel there's quite a well structured special needs part of the education system. I think it requires a bit of a lecture. I think people who have special needs kids, we with Aliyah with kids, we provide a lecture which explains what different special needs can come up and what they need, like what kind of classes they could go into, what sort of diagnosis they need, and what they can get from the government. So what sort of support they can get. So it's a bit of a, every country has their own system. I guess one of the most supported diagnoses is autism or ASD. If you're on the spectrum, there's a lot of government support in that area. Down syndrome, there's a lot of services right from birth that are rehabilitative, and you can also have special needs kids inside of a regular classroom, depending what that is, with support classes, or support groups, so that they're taken out and sort of given what they're needed. So there's different ways of doing it, but it's worth kind of, having either Nefesh to Nefesh. There are different groups that will explain that whole area, which it's worth kind of knowing what there is beforehand. But for sure, I think it's a fairly highly developed system for special needs, depending what it is, depending what the needs are, in the kids.
Sure. So tell us, if someone
supported than others.
If someone's making Aliyah with a family,
is not quite as it's common, but it doesn't get the same level of support, and neither does ADHD or ADD. You sort of have to have them integrated and have a little bit of maybe an outside therapist or someone who's trying to integrate it with a teacher. It's not the same as when you have, but yeah, that's just an example. Different diagnoses get different levels of help, I guess.
How did your Aliyah go with being a psychotherapist and being licensed here? And just, we have 1 minute left of the show. Just tell us quickly, was it difficult to transfer your license and your education over? Well,
I work privately here in Israel as a psychotherapist. There's no particular licensing that needs to take place. I'm totally qualified in Australia, and I have my license there that's current. But I made a decision because I already had researched that it was going to be a difficult transfer.
Sharni, we got to conclude. I'm sorry, we have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sharni Brodesky. Please look her up if you're making LA with a family. And thank you for joining the show today. Well, happy Sukkot.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicole Eko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.